Okay, testing. Well, hello, everyone. Excited to get this smart attendance set up here. And so go to English, which you can see what I'm doing here. Share screen, and go to Cyber Campus, log in here. Log in. So go like this. Here, space. Okay, so there you go. Stuff pops up. Then we go to Introduction to American Political Institutions, and we go to Attendance, and we click on week 12, and we go to Smart Attendance, and your number is 291. 291 is your Smart Attendance number. So let me put that in the chat box, 291. And please share that with others if somebody asks. Okay, and so, all right, 291 is your Smart Attendance number, and so I'll discuss a bit about the debate. The debate, remember, the debate in the class is always on the second class of the week. So we always have the debate on Wednesday, unless something special comes up where somebody has to be away. So yeah, the debate in the class is always on Wednesday. And then Wednesday debate will be between Juliet and Kim Jong-un on to South Koreans. Donald Trump will likely be reelected in 2024. And so the book that we're using, was made available for purchase on, at least through Amazon, in March of last year. So that's like 14 months ago. And so that means the book was written or finished. Well, I know from reading the chapters that a book was finished after Donald Trump was formally impeached for a second time, after he lost the election in November 2020. He encouraged that mob attack on the Congress on January 6, 2021. And then the US Congress voted to impeach him again. And when you read the last chapter of the book, the author states in the last chapter of the book that he does not know if he's going to be convicted. So in other words, they have the impeachment trial in the US Senate after that chapter was finished, after the book was written. And so that's something to keep in mind, that they're writing that book in those chapters in January of 2021. And so that's almost, 15 months ago. And a lot has happened in 15 months since then. When you get to the final chapter, in fact, chapter 8, I think, the last chapter, the author implies that Donald Trump's political career is over because he encouraged that uprising to attack the US Congress on January 6, 2021. When you read the last chapter, you'll see that. And he's wrong. He's not over. Donald Trump looks like he's getting ready to run for president again. That uprising that he encouraged to interfere and block the US Congress from certifying the results of the Electoral College vote that ended the election, he claimed that Donald Trump threw away all of his contribution to the success of the Republican Party. And I'm not so certain that that's necessarily the case, not to mention whether or not Donald Trump's political career is over. And so the chapter that you're reading this week on chapter 5 and chapter 6 focus more on the state and congressional elections, or I should say, by analyzing the elections in 2020 according to the state behavior in certain states and within different regions of Nebraska, for example. Analyzing topics and issues that are important. For example, how important is the rural versus urban divide in American society in voting for Donald Trump or not? And it's very important. It's very important that rural areas love Donald Trump. Not everybody who lives in an agricultural rural area loves Donald Trump, but Donald Trump dominates the rural areas. And that's a theme that you'll see in these two chapters and in other chapters about how Donald Trump, the reason why Donald Trump lost Georgia by 12,000 votes, and Joe Biden won by 12,000 votes in the state of Georgia, one of the old Confederacy states that had slavery, one of the states that few, if anybody, would have thought that that Joe Biden would win. The reason he won is because Georgia is a state that's dominated by a huge city, a mega city, Atlanta. And Atlanta is one of the corporate headquarters of the world. Coca-Cola is headquartered there. CNN is headquartered there. Lots of big companies are headquartered there. And it's not just a big American city. It's one of the biggest, most important cities that dominates Georgia. And because it's such a diverse, large, global city, it was overwhelmingly voting for Biden, and that counteracted the other parts of Georgia that voted overwhelmingly for Trump. And so that's a theme in this chapter. Just how much is that divide in the United States by class, rural versus urban, not to mention by race. Those are all topics in the readings that you'll have this week and next week and the last week of the semester. And again, this information is, these chapters are 15, 16 months old. And for example, they do not cover how, no, what do I want to highlight here? Well, no, they cover that. I was going to say about the Hispanic vote, but they're trying to come up with explanations for how it is could Donald Trump do better in the elections in 2020 among Mexican Americans, Hispanic Americans, than he did in 2016 after his effort to try to build the wall, a big, huge, long 1,000 kilometer, 10-meter high wall to separate Mexico from the United States along 1,000 kilometers. And expelling separating Hispanic children away from their parents when they cross the border. He did better in 2020 than he did in 2016 among Hispanic Americans. And they really don't have an explanation for it. They admit it in the last chapter of the book. We don't know why. We can speculate. I think I have a theory, and it goes back to nationalism, so that's perhaps not surprising. But keep that in mind. So like, for example, here is something I just saw today in today's New York Times, in that since Donald Trump left office, it reports that in this latest New York Times article, at least 357 sitting Republican legislatures in the state governments, the 50 state governments, in closely contested battleground states. So not all states, in the states that were close, like Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, have used the power of their office to discredit or try to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. To this day, according to a review of legislative votes, records, and official statements from the New York Times. And Okay, it looks like some of you are kind of warm, so I'm going to turn on the aircon. And if you like the aircon, we'll keep the aircon on. If you don't like it because it's kind of loud, we can turn it off. So it'll come on, but let's see how this works for the rest of the semester. If you like the aircon running, if you can hear me without any problem. So they're still arguing or trying to decertify the election in 2020, that Joe Biden really lost, that he stole it, that Donald Trump is the rightful president. And it goes on here, the tally accounts for 44% of the Republican legislatures in the 9 states where the presidential race was most nearly decided. In each of those states, the election was conducted without any evidence of widespread fraud, leaving election officials from both parties in agreement on the victory of Joseph Biden. And this is not indicated or clear enough in your textbook how much the lies and misinformation that the Trump campaign spread in the 2020 election has continued to reverberate and affect American politics today. That's not indicated in the textbook. In fact, it's kind of dismissed. Like I told you, they just assume that Donald Trump's career is done, and the Republican Party is vanquished, or not vanquished, but the credit or the influence that Trump had in increasing Republican Party support to potentially be powerful competitor in the future, despite the fact that America is becoming more and more diverse, so that by no later than 2050, most of the American population will no longer be European American. They'll be Asian American, Hispanic American, African American, no longer majority white country. And so that's an important difference. And this is somehow very significant. The Times analysis exposes how deeply rooted lies and misinformation about how former President Donald J. Trump's defeat have become in state legislatures, which play an integral role in U.S. democracy. In some, the false view that the election was stolen. I got to make sure you can see that. Are you able? The false view that the election was stolen, either by fraud or as a result of pandemic-related changes to the process, is now widely accepted as fact among Republican lawmakers, turning state houses into hotbeds of conspiratorial thinking, specious legal theories. So this is highlighted in the book, that particularly in later chapters, that the American electoral process and the bureaucracy at the state and county level did a tremendously effective job in holding the most efficient election outcomes we have seen in the United States ever. And this was in response to the pandemic, to the need to, or the desire to give people easier ways to vote so that they would not be afraid to come to vote because they might get infected with the coronavirus. So encouraging them to vote by mail through absentee ballot, and organizing all of this was one of the great, they applaud in the book, great achievements of the electoral bureaucracy in the United States that's, again, run primarily at the state and the local level. And all of those efforts to increase access to voting are being used by the Trump campaign and the Trump supporters as evidence of fraud. That the pandemic-related changes to make it easier for people to vote by mail with an absentee ballot, that allowed Donald Trump's enemies to steal the election by manipulating the ballots. And if you're an elected official who must win elections, you know that the typical Republican Party self-identifier, not all, but the typical one, the most common one, the modal one, loves Donald Trump. And these Republican legislatures in the state level that, according to the U.S. Constitution, are primarily responsible for organizing the elections in the United States at the state level, are acting on these lies that Donald Trump spread and continues to spread. These fictions about rigged elections and widespread fraud, again, and your authors of your books, no, there was no fraud. It was amazingly successful. Have provided the foundation for new laws that make it harder to vote and easier to insert partisanship in the vote count. In 3 states, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, state lawmakers successfully pushed for investigations that sowed doubt about the results and tested the boundaries of their oversight. But again, I don't want to go through it all unless you want me to. I just want to highlight some of these tendencies. You know, the New York Times has its own analysis unit. And that's an important point. These media organizations like the Associated Press, the New York Times, they have their own in-house election analysis units, or they work with other external groups together in partnership with these media companies. And it says here, in most states, the lawmakers who challenge the 2020 results do not yet have the numbers or the support of governors, secretaries of state, or legislative leaders to achieve their most audacious aims. They have advanced but not enacted legislation that would make it easier for politicians to overturn elections. And it's only a minority of Republican lawmakers who promote the legally dubious view that they, and not the votes of the people, can select the electors who formally cast a ballot for the president in the Electoral College. And goes on here, election and democracy experts say they see the rise of anti-democratic impulses in state houses, that's the state legislatures, as a clear new threat to the health of American democracy. State legislatures hold a unique position in the country's democratic apparatus, wielding a constitutionally mandated power to set the times, places, and manner of holding elections. Cheered on by Mr. Trump as he eyes another run for the White House in 2024, many state legislatures have shown that they see that power as licensed to exert greater control over the outcome of elections. So again, the last chapter of the book implies that Trump is done, that he's done. No, he's not done. He's like, you know, a vampire. He's coming back from the dead. It goes on here. 4 days before the House of Representatives was set to formally tally the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden on January 6th of 2021 last year, an act long considered purely ceremonial, Mr. Trump's advisors gathered more than 300 state legislatures on a Zoom call, according to a report by the House Committee investigating the June 6th attack on the Capitol. So the House of Representatives organized a committee to investigate what happened on January 6th. But it wasn't done as a bipartisan Republican, it wasn't done with the support of the Republican congressional leadership. 2 Republicans are on this House committee investigating what happened on January 6th, but they volunteered to be on. The Republican congressional leadership, McCarthy, sorry, McCarthy is his name, for the House, and Mitch McConnell for the Senate. They didn't want anything to do with this. So if the Republicans win in November and take control of the House of Representatives, when they meet early January 2023, they will probably stop the work of this committee. And we all know this. You know this, I know this, they know this. So what we see, this House committee that's forcing people to testify, it's issuing, in the Latin term that we use in English is a subpoena. A subpoena is a Latin term that you must come testify before the House, and you must swear an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And you must report and provide all documents that we ask for in doing our investigation of what happened on January 6th. So the term in American, well, Europe, I don't know, maybe if you use it in Europe as well, subpoena. So the committee issued subpoenas to all of these people that apparently played some role in the January 6th, or they think played some role in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. But if the Republicans win, they will, and take over the House, they will take over control of this committee and will either just ignore it or end it. And so this committee is trying to carry out its investigations as it possibly can between now and November 8th election. So we're coming up into June. So June, July, August, September, October, 5.5 months left to find out what happened on January 6th. Fully to find out what happened. And Mr. Trump has continued to try to convince state legislatures that they can decertify the 2020 election, a process that has no basis in either the United States Constitution or state constitutions. State lawmakers have responded to Mr. Trump's calls for action largely by overhauling voting procedures. So that's a big achievement highlighted in your book. Like, they carried out this election despite the worst public health disaster in 100 years, while under attack from Donald Trump. All of these thousands of electoral officials and the 3,000 counties in the United States, together with the state governments, they made adaptations. They moved primary date elections for primaries later in the year to accommodate to deal with the coronavirus. They instituted no excuse absentee voting. Anybody could request an absentee ballot to vote through the mail, like I do here in Korea, back home for my Stark County place of residence, to vote in the Ohio and U.S. elections. Or vote in other ways so they don't have to go and stand in line and get infected with the coronavirus or risk getting infected. What an achievement. And with 67% voter turnout, the highest voter turnout in 120 years. Oh my God, it's amazing. It's incredible. And they did it without adequate money. The US Congress didn't give them enough money to carry this out. They asked for billions of dollars. They didn't get it in the pandemic relief program. Yay! And of course, you see how the Trump campaign is saying that this was all part of a conspiracy to steal the election from Trump. And so they're overhauling all those voting procedures that were adopted to deal with the pandemic. A total of 34 laws that include restrictions on voting were passed in 2021, according to review by the Times, since the book was published or written. And 18 laws were passed this year, according to a report from the States United Democracy Center, a nonprofit group. Some limited drop boxes or mail-in voting, so you could vote, by filling out the ballot and just driving your car up, like you went to an ATM and dropping your ballot in the drop box, or mail-in voting. Others put more power over elections in the hands of state legislatures rather than local officials or secretaries of state. I mean, again, each of these states has a state Congress, except for Nebraska that has just one house. 99% of Americans, I mean, I have trouble telling you, who are my Ohio state representatives in the Ohio legislature? And I'm a political scientist. I think it's Kurt Olslager is the state senator for my district, and the representative might be Michelle Hagen. But 99.9% of Ohio people couldn't tell you who are these people. Same in Tennessee or California, and they're moving to try to take control over the outcome of elections. So I just wanted to highlight how this is the latest news report from yesterday, which contrasts with your book, which implies that Donald Trump is done, and he's nowhere near done, which is interesting in terms of from many perspectives. So let's cover what these two chapters cover in terms of looking at the states in particular. So a focus on so-called swing states is typical of U.S. presidential election analysis. Again, can you see that on your computers? You see this on your computer right now? I just have to keep reminding myself that I have to keep sharing the screen because it doesn't necessarily. Okay, all right. So in 2016, when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, the three swing states of focus were in the so-called Rust Belt, where the weather is bad in the winter. Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, versus the Sun Belt. And the Sun Belt is the Southwest and the South, right? Florida, Texas, Las Vegas, Nevada, Phoenix, Arizona. And that implies old industry, strong unions, blue-collar jobs. That used to be the blue wall, the states that would be the foundation for the Democratic Party, with the Democratic Party's main constituency being in labor unions. And to the shock of many people, Donald Trump, the Republican, won in these three swing states in 2016. Donald Trump won these 3 traditionally Democratic states by very small plurality vote, margins to give Trump the majority of the Electoral College vote. But in 2020, Biden won 4 states by very small plurality margins. Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to surpass the 270 electoral vote finishing line. Let's look at these. So this chapter is focusing on states that were not serious so-called battleground states. They're not swing states. They're considered, oh, Nebraska's red. Red means Republican. Why do they say red means Republican and blue states are Democratic? As far as I can tell, it goes back to when I was a child in the 1970s. And we would see on the television the results of the election being reported by the news anchors, the news agencies on the television, and they would always color the Republican states red that were going for Richard Nixon or Gerald Ford or Ronald Reagan in 1980, and the states that voted for Democrats, whether they be George McGovern in 1972 or Jimmy Carter in 1976 or Michael Dukakis in 1988, they would be colored blue. And when you mix blue and red together, what color do you get? When you mix blue and red? Purple! So supposedly Texas is becoming a purple state, a swing state. And why is Texas becoming a purple state when it used to be, well, beginning in 1976, many Southerners, conservative and not so conservative, voted for Jimmy Carter because Jimmy Carter was from Georgia, the peanut farmer from Georgia, right? Governor of Georgia. But after him, these southern states, including Texas, all went red. Voted for Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Texas was one of these red states. Now Texas is becoming more and more purple. Why? Why is Texas becoming more and more purple? Why is Georgia purple? I mean, Biden actually won Georgia, which had been Republican for so long. And the claim is, and this is addressed in your book, demographic change. More and more immigration and growing proportion of the population that are descendants of immigrants, recent immigrants. I mean, I'm a descendant of a recent immigrant, but I'm considered white because Italians, since the middle of the 20th century, have assimilated and considered to be European Americans. Although, as I told you, 120 years ago, people from Southern Europe, Greeks, Italians, they were not considered white. So, and that's important for what's going on in 2022 because there's evidence that this assimilation process is working for Hispanic Americans. That lots of Hispanics admire Donald Trump the way my dad admired Donald Trump. My dad was an Italian immigrant, came over poor, came over with nothing to the United States. High school degree, couldn't speak English, had nothing. He actually had to stop in Buffalo and harvest onions to make some money for a bus ticket to get to his family's friends in Ohio where my family lives. And he made some money, started a pizza restaurant, built some houses, rented them out, sent me to college, and he's a Republican. He was a Republican. And that process appears to be repeating now with many Hispanic Americans. So, you know, they like Trump. They like his conservatism. They like his manhood, his masculinity. He's the image. He's the image of what I want to become, a successful, rich business person who did it on my own without having to ask the government to give me something. I remember my dad saying the same thing to me, you know, years ago when you heard about these local policies in Ohio to help black people start businesses. He says, you know, nobody ever gave me anything when I got to it. Nobody gave me nothing. But when we have to set aside special programs to make sure that black-owned businesses get a certain percentage of government contracts. You know, he just didn't understand this. Like, and I think something like that's going on with Hispanics. And they make that point at the end of the book, the last chapter, that this is not new to Donald Trump. Hispanics have been moving more to the Republican Party since George W. Bush. So white is subjective. Race is a subjective category. Biologists have a definition of race, but the way the term race is used in politics is it's a strictly subjective definition. Like I told you, Italians are not white. The first dual split decision, Maine and Nebraska. So Maine and Nebraska, the two states that don't allocate all of their electoral college votes to the winner, the plurality winner of the election within the state. Why? Because they decided to do it that way. The states decide how they handle their elections. So the 2020 election was unprecedented in many ways, including the fact that both parties nominated their oldest candidates in history and was held during the pandemic. 48 states and the District of Columbia, which is not a state, award their electoral college votes on a winner-take-all basis. Maine and Nebraska, however, allocate their electoral college votes according to a candidate's electoral win within each electoral district in a state that corresponds with a congressional district. So Maine has three how many? Okay, we'll have to go back and check. But yeah, Nebraska has 5 electoral college votes. It has 3 congressional districts. So it has 2 senators plus 3 congressional districts for 5 electoral college votes. The potential candidate, the presidential candidate who wins the statewide election overall gets the 2 remaining electoral college votes. So each of the congressional districts has an election to decide who gets each district's 1 electoral college vote. And then the presidential candidate in Nebraska who wins the statewide election gets a plurality of the votes statewide, gets the remaining 2. Why? That's the way Nebraska decided to do it. Known as the Cornhusker State, Nebraska is safely Republican, but Barack Obama did win the Omaha-based 2nd district in 2008. So this is a big city. This is a modern city. This is a nice. Who lives in Omaha? Who's most famous? Does anybody know who the sage of Omaha is? Have you heard of Warren Buffett? The billionaire, multi-billionaire old guy up there with Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett is based in Omaha. So that tells you Omaha is an interesting place. It's an urban area. It's got lots of hospitals. It's got universities. It's got Warren Buffett. 80% of Nebraska's voters are concentrated in Omaha's Douglas County. The rest are concentrated in Sarpy County, make up the rest leaning Republican. This has been in the news because these primary elections that are underway now for Republican and Democratic candidates for the general election in November, Donald Trump endorsed a candidate, I think, for a statewide office. I can't remember if it was for senator or governor, a guy by the name of Herbster, and he lost to the establishment Republican nominated by the establishment party figures. So there's a limit to Donald Trump's influence. His nominee, his endorsed person lost. He was a wild guy, been charged with groping, sexual assault against women, and Donald Trump still endorsed them, and he lost. But other Donald Trump endorsees have won in the last week in other states. The Omaha area voted for Republicans after 2008, but then shifted for Biden in 2020. College-educated whites in general swung to Biden. It used to be that college-educated whites tend to vote Republican in the United States. Now they're moving towards Democrats in terms of majority. It reflects a general national trend. Geographically disparate but demographically similar groups are voting more similarly across the states. So geographically disparate, like Omaha, Maine, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, but demographically similar groups are voting more similarly. That is, by national class and socioeconomic status is more important in determining voting behavior than local geographic location. And that's what you would expect in a nation state. But still, America still has that strong regional focus, and that's slowly declining. So as occurred nationally, Democratic House congressional candidates did more poorly than expected in suburban districts, including the 2nd district in Nebraska, despite Biden winning it. So in 2020, there was a big hope that Biden would win, and that also the Democrats would win big in the House, and they lost seats. They only have like a 7-seat majority in the House of Representatives. They lost like 20-some seats in 2020, despite Joe Biden as the Democrat beating the Republicans for president, which was a surprise. But then they did win, again, and it's not in the book. The two Democratic candidates for senator won in Georgia. So Georgia has two Democratic senators. One's a black man and one's a Jewish man. Georgia, the heartland of the Confederacy, they elected Joe Biden as president and Ossoff, Jewish American, as a senator, and Warnock, black man, as a senator. And that's not covered. That's Senate outcome. So that chapter was written, it must have been written in late, because the election for the senators was like January 5th, 2021, and it's not covered in the book. So that was a shock. So Maine has 2 congressional districts, so that's 4 electoral college votes. It began splitting its electoral votes in 1972. Presidential voting behavior was the same in these 2 districts until 2000. In 2000, Al Gore won the state by 5%, winning the first district by 8%, but only by 2% in the second district. The first district includes the state capital of August, the liberal city of Portland, and the coastal town of Kennebunkport, which is a summer resort area. So again, the urban areas. The second district includes the rugged northern part of the state with its declining logging industry. A lot of rural poverty up there. It provides fertile ground for populist candidates. It mentioned the 1990s Reform Party led by Ross Perot performed well there. Trump first attempted to run for presidency on the Reform Party ticket in 2000, but then he quit very quickly after he announced he was running for president. Obama carried Maine easily twice. I know about Maine because somehow the state of Maine got the contract from the United States Agency for International Development to set up the American University in Bulgaria. And how they got it, the University of Maine got that contract to set up the American University in Bulgaria, I think has to do with the fact that there was somebody in USAID who was an alumnus, a graduate of the University of Maine, and he wanted to help develop Maine because Maine wants to have more international contacts. So the University of Maine set up the American University in Bulgaria. So I have a special sensitive part in my heart, good and bad, for Maine. I mean, it's a rural state. It's not, even though it's part of the New England, it's not a cosmopolitan urban center like Boston, Massachusetts. Hillary Clinton won it in 2016 only with 48% of the vote versus Trump winning 45%. So for the first time, Maine split its electoral college vote. Trump won the second district by, it says this many votes, 37,000 votes, while Clinton won the first district by 56,000 votes. And so Clinton got 3 electoral college votes to Trump's 1 vote. So Biden also only got 3 of the 4 electoral college votes. In 2020, the second district stayed red, while Biden won the state overall vote by 53% to 44%. So Maine highlighted the surprising difficulty the Democrats had in Senate elections despite Biden's national presidential win. Susan Collins is the Republican female. There's only like 2 female Republican senators in the U.S. Senate, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Susan Collins of Maine. And they're both Republicans, and they've been under a lot of pressure in regard to confirming Supreme Court nominees for the U.S. Supreme Court that Donald Trump and others have nominated. And Donald Trump nominated 3, and they have been under a lot of pressure because the concern was that these nominees would vote to overturn Roe versus Wade, and they have. So they attempt to, these people, their behavior, they don't breathe without thinking about how is it going to impact public opinion in winning the next election. So she kind of walks the line. She's a woman, but she's a Republican. So now she's claiming that Brett Kavanaugh wasn't honest to me when he told me he was going to defend Roe versus Wade, that it was settled precedent. She said that last week. because as the Supreme Court is preparing to likely overturn Roe versus Wade in a couple weeks' time here, because she voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, one of Trump's nominees. Lots of money was poured into this race against her in 2020. She won re-election against the Maine Democratic State House Speaker, Sarah Gideon. A lot of people thought that Gideon was going to win, but she lost to Susan Collins. Lots of money from outside of Maine poured into Maine to buy television advertising time, and this was used against Gideon. Look, all these outsiders coming in and telling us Mainers what to do. They're not even from Maine. This is bad. These outsiders, it's none of their business. That kind of rhetoric. And it worked. She did vote for Ketanji Brown Jackson. So did Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney. 3 Republican senators voted to confirm the first black woman to be on the U.S. Supreme Court earlier this year. New England, a banner region for Biden. So Biden did better in 2020 in New England than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. He seemed to repeat the performance of Obama. New Hampshire is the most conservative of the New England states. They're most likely to vote Republican in 2000. George Bush won in 2000 with 48% of the vote. Trump nearly got it in 2016, but Biden won it in 2020. Keep in mind, Biden in 2020 came in 5th in the Democratic primary in February 2020, another loss after Iowa. Oh, he lost. Then the Nevada caucus. Oh, he lost the Nevada caucus. First the Iowa caucus, then the Nevada caucus, and then the first primary direct election was in New Hampshire, and Biden comes in 5th. Lost again. And then he turned it around in South Carolina, thanks to, not only, but thanks to the African-American vote. Just because a state is considered safe for either party does not mean that prevailing political trends do not apply to it. Yeah, so it says here, the Hispanic vote was typically a focus of Sun Belt election political analysis. You know, when you think about Hispanic population, we don't think about New England, but they are heavily represented in New England. Hispanic vote trends were similar in the Northeast, with Biden's 2020 support among New England Hispanic voters declining from Clinton's support levels in 2016. But Biden's performance among secular whites also grew. So Virginia, another, again, this is not covered in the book. Since Virginia voted for Biden, they've now elected a Republican governor. Glenn Youngkin won early this year the governor's race as a Republican in Virginia, focusing upon critical race theory and the danger of critical race theory supposedly being enforced to indoctrinate students into feeling ashamed about being white, and also potentially teaching them about being gay. Being gay is okay. So maybe you should consider. The concern about militant Republicans is that the Democrats and their liberal activists are trying to groom young children, grooming them so that they'll very unsettling propaganda rhetoric that LGBTQ rights and allowing gender affirming theory treatment of medical treatment is all part of this grooming of public education systems dominated by leftists and liberals. They're professors in universities brainwashing their students as teachers to teach them that you don't have to be heterosexual. And it is emotional, but it's about mobilizing people to vote, getting your base so angry and outraged that they'll make sure they go to the trouble of voting, either in Virginia for governor, for Glenn Youngkin, in the upcoming elections in November. Virginia's regional voting patterns reflected national polarization trends. Yeah, so I highlighted how Glenn Youngkin won. Since this book was written, And that wasn't supposed to happen. Terry McAuliffe was a popular Democratic governor of Virginia. Virginia does not allow governors to serve repeat terms. You serve one term, then you step down, you can run again. Terry McAuliffe, he's been a person that was rumored to be thinking about running for president. He was I think the head of the Democratic National Committee, the chairperson at one point. He was a popular governor of Georgia when he was a Democrat. He stepped back, and I thought he'd win again, and he lost to Glenn Youngkin. And he made some gaffes. He said to a reporter that only teachers should be responsible for determining what the curriculum is that children study in school, teachers. And his adversary said, you mean parents don't have a right to have a say over what their children are taught in schools? And so he kind of messed it up. And haven't heard from him since. Okay, moving red. My home state of Ohio and Iowa. Iowa voted for Trump twice. I'm sorry, Iowa voted for Obama twice, and then Trump in 2016 voted for Trump. And then Biden won it again in 2020, 53% to Biden, 45% to Trump. Ohio used to be the penultimate swing state. You know, Richard Nixon once said back in the early 1970s, if you want to figure out how to win the US presidential election, figure out how to win Ohio. Ohio is the microcosm, the little version of the United States. And since the last two elections, Trump won Ohio by 8 percentage points. That's a lot. And why? Deindustrialization, Northeast Ohio seems to correlate with support for Trump, responding to his protectionist rhetoric against China and free trade. Tim Ryan, a House representative, Democrat representing Youngstown and to the west of Akron, had the closest race of his career in 2020. So Tim Ryan is now running for senator for Ohio to fill the seat that Rob Portman, the Republican senator, he's retiring. So he is the Democratic nominee for senator running against Vance. C.J. Vance, the man who wrote Hillbilly Elegy, a big Trumper, Trump endorsed candidate, won. So Vance versus Ryan in November. And Vance will probably win. Democrats have much work to do in order to become more competitive here in Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. Florida also used to be a swing state, but it always seems to go for the Republicans in the last couple of elections. Democrats have focused in Florida in presidential and gubernatorial elections, but they continue to perform disappointingly. Obama won North Carolina in 2008 as the first Democrat since 1976 due to, in part to sky-high black voter enthusiasm. So Jimmy Carter ran in 1976, the southerner from Georgia. And then Obama lost it in 2012. Okay, so Democratic congressional candidates made advances in 2018. Trump won North Carolina by larger than expected margins in 2016, and Trump won all 3 states in 2016 and 20, in part due to Trump's gains in 2020 among minorities. So Trump won these states in part because he got more Hispanic votes, and then also in 2020, more black men voted for Trump than in 2016. Despite all the things that Trump said, called African countries, quote unquote, shithole countries. He called them that. These shithole countries. We don't want immigrants from shithole countries, meaning Haiti, Africa. And he did better among black men in 2020 than he did in 2016. He made these comments when he was president about shithole countries. How can you explain that? People desperately want in. Let us in. We want to be part of America. Let us assimilate. We want to be rich and prosperous. We want to be admitted. We want We want to be respected. We want to be allowed to be part of the main. Let us in. Emotion. Like I said, you can't understand politics, including voting behavior, unless you understand the role of emotion. And that means identity and comparing myself with other people. Florida was one of just 6 states in which Trump improved his election victor margins in 2020. So Trump did better in 2020 than in 2016. And why? Apparently, people look for explanations. Also, they say well, Cuban Americans, they hate communism generally because they associate with Castro. But there's been more people coming from Venezuela against the socialist revolution in Venezuela. And that's supposedly another reason why Hispanic voters that are disproportionately concentrated in Florida supported Trump. I mean, Trump actually did better in 2020 in the big state of Florida than he did in 2016. Clinton benefited in 2016 from Trump's unpopularity among Cuban voters, but Trump substantially improved his performance in 2020 through Trump's portrayal of the Democrats as sympathetic to leftism. With the communist regime in Cuba, it's bogeyman. So one of the things that Trump did is he reversed much of the liberalization policies that Obama adopted to make it easier to do business with and go to Cuba and send money to Cuba and do business with Cuba. I mean, that's the important thing. Because the electoral college system in the United States, America's Cuba policy is disproportionately influenced by how to win Florida in elections, because the Cuban American population tends to dominate Cuban politics. And they fled there disproportionately after the 1958 Castro Revolution. And they're intensely anti-communist. They are intensely conservative, intensely libertarian, no sense of social justice. If you're poor, it's your fault. You're a bad person. I don't care if you're poor, and you can't take my money to give it to you through social welfare programs. Orange County, Florida, the home of Disney World, became more democratic, reflecting this trend nationally of tourism-dependent economic areas becoming more democratic. And so DeSantis is now, he's a Trump neophyte that if Trump doesn't run for president, he will run, and he will probably be a top figure. He talks like Trump. People say that he's really smart. But he knows what he needs to say to win over Trump-type voters. So he's reversed or led the effort to revoke the special status that Disney World has. Have you been to Disney World? None of you have been to Disney World. Oh no, you have, right? So Disney World has special self-governing local status in Orlando, where it's concentrated, in order to fund and provide for its own fire service, police service, road. And that was given under laws that were adopted 60 years ago. And DeSantis revoked this special legal status for Disney World in Orlando in response to Disney World condemning Florida for passing laws limiting public school references to gender identity in teaching children. The workers for Disney World, the employees, demanded that the Walt Disney Company executives express disappointment or resistance to what Florida has done. And DeSantis reacted by pushing the Florida legislature to revoke Disney World's special administrative taxation status. And so, I mean, if you go to Disney World, you do get a strong sense that it's not very judgmental regarding gender identity. Let's put it that way. needs to do. DeSantis knows what he needs to do, including punishing corporations for trying to enforce their wokeism. That's the term. Their wokeism on Americans just because they're a big, rich, powerful corporation. So this populist, conservative reactionism. Biden lost North Carolina in 2020 by less than 1% of the vote. The Native Indian vote was heavily pro-Obama in 2020. I think that might be a mistake. 2020? I got to check. I think I might have typed too quickly. So I have to go back and check. That's a mistake. I must have made a mistake. Was heavily pro-Obama, what, in 2008 maybe? That one might be the one for Trump in 2016 and a landslide for Trump in I think that must have been 2012, like this, 2012. And one for Trump in 2016 and a landslide for Trump in 2020. The Lumbee Indian vote for Trump seems to have been strongly influenced by relatively low support for gay marriage. That supposedly was also a factor that swung some Hispanics. That as the media, like the New York Times, try to understand what's going on with these Hispanics and more black men voting because they don't like LGBTQ notions, rights, and gay marriage. Like a man is a man and a woman is a woman. So voting for no preference in Democratic primary 2020 notably increased because of the hostility of liberal cultural policies that their Democratic Party supports among working class Democrats. And so this is a major focus of the Republican Party now. So to give you a sense of so in 2020, these areas voted for Trump by more than 10% they did in 2016. And I think this is Lumbee County here, the Indian tribe area. I mean, typically that's supposed to be Democratic constituencies. The Native Americans vote for Democrats. You can see rural counties. Then you see these are like the urban areas where North Carolina State are located. Here, the universities. Yeah, so regarding Texas, little change from 2016 occurred, although one exception was in South Texas. In Starr County, which is most entirely Hispanic, witnessed the largest swing in the country. Biden held it by 52% to 47% for Trump, but Clinton had won it by 79% to 19% for Trump in 2016. Trump was the first Republican to carry Zapata County since 1720, which is similar to Starr County. Trump also won Frio, Jim Wells, Kennedy, and LaSalle counties, which had voted against Reagan amidst its victories in 1984. So why? And people try to explain this, and they're still kind of mystified. What happened? They say, well, also, many Hispanic Americans work for the police. They work for border control. This is on the border with Mexico. So lots of Hispanic Americans, they got a job with border control, and Trump is all about border control. So they think about themselves as being Americans on the front line trying to defend America from illegal immigration. Trump, they don't like gay marriage, and Trump is against gay marriage. They're heavily Catholic. And Catholics are against abortion. And these people are culturally conservative. Like, what's going on? He made all these comments about Hispanics, right? What was that one statement he made in 2015 when he announced he's running for president? These Mexicans are coming into America. They're bringing their drugs. They're bringing their crime. They're rapists. They're not good. And I assume some of them are good people. And then he said that in 2015. He won in 2016. He did everything that he did as president, and he did better among Hispanics. Republicans seem to have superior campaign organizational efforts than Democrats. Okay, there's no one single explanation. The Democrats halted door-to-door campaigning due to COVID-19 pandemic, but Republicans did not. And this region is poor with low-quality internet service. It was a frequent problem. And oil and gas industry, there's another explanation. Oil and gas industries are important employers in the region. And Trump doesn't want to move away from fossil fuels, like the Biden and the Democrats do. Okay, so let's see. Let me see here. So you want to see how we're teaching students in American schools where critical race theory might be taught, how to vote in elections. Here is an example. Yes? Okay, thank you. Here's an example of how we teach American students about how to think about political campaigns. So let me send this to you. Sorry. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to share file. So I go to this share file? No. No. I'm trying to recall how to share file. I think I'm chatting. That's right. Share file. So I go here, and I go here, and I gotta go here. Go to my computer. Where are the files? File. And we go to U.S. government. We go to it's bigger. So please download that file and open up that file. And this is the file which I've downloaded, I sent to you. So we teach our students in these same schools where people are concerned about critical race theory. How do voters decide between candidates on election day? There are many different things that people consider when voting. Some seem silly, some make sense. Check the things you would do or want to know about the qualities before making your final decision in the voting booth. So you're supposed to listen to both candidates' speeches, find out what kind of pet he or she owns, watch a debate between the candidates, decide on how you feel about the issues, find out the candidate's favorite sport, if the candidates have kids, what the candidates did before he or she ran for office, the candidate's voting records, ask friends and family what you think. So it asks you to pick one thing that you checked and share why you think it is helpful in choosing a candidate. And then pick one thing that you did not check and share why you think it is helpful in choosing a candidate. So that's the same thing here. So since we have 3 people in class today, I'll ask the 3, well, let me flip a coin. Let's see randomly. Of course, I didn't bring a coin. I forgot to bring a coin. So let me go back to the class list. So how can I do this randomly without flipping a coin? Does somebody have a coin on them they can loan to me? Flip a coin. Okay, so heads is the first 4, and it's tails. So it's the bottom 2. Heads is Kim Kyung-Gu, and it's tails. So Joe Eugene, which of these would you select in as being most helpful in determining who is the better candidate you would support? Joe Eugene?
I think decide how you feel about the issues.
Okay. And then why? Why is that more important than knowing what kind of pet he or she owns?
Decide how you feel about the issues.
The point is, it's not really so simple. I know how I feel about the issues, but I also know that candidates are going to tell me what they think I want to hear, or at least enough people say to enough people what they want to hear in order to win an election. So I know this. So I know what I want on an issue. Let's say I want tax cuts. I don't want to pay as much taxes. And I asked somebody running for president or Congress or state senator, state legislature, are you going to increase taxes? And what are they going to say? No, probably no. Or they might say, no, not on people that are not really super rich. And that might well be what will determine how I vote. But then they might get into office and behave in ways and act in ways that go against what I thought they promised they would do. And that was, for example, what happened with George H.W. Bush. He said when he was running for president in 1988, he said, read my lips, no new taxes. And then he became president, led the United States in the war against Saddam Hussein in Kuwait, thought he was really popular. And in the midst of the economic crisis, he raised taxes. But he thought, well, take that too seriously. And then he lost to Bill Clinton in 1992. So what might be a benefit of knowing what kind of pet he or she owns? I mean, if he has a pit bull dog, there's been a lot of controversy about pit bulls in the United States. Gangsters and thugs like pit bulls. What if he has a pit bull? What if he doesn't have a dog? Donald Trump was the first president in 100 years, at least, who didn't have a pet. What kind of president doesn't have a pet in the White House? He doesn't like animals. What does that tell you about Donald Trump? There's something wrong with his character. If he doesn't like animals, maybe he doesn't like humans either. It could be. I'm saying these are not all just simply ridiculous estimations. You're trying to decide who you're going to support, knowing that they're going to try to win elections. They don't get everybody to vote for them. They get a plurality to vote for them. And some people are going to write off. But Donald Trump, we had thought that Donald Trump was not going to be appealing to Hispanics and to blacks. And he did better in 2020 than he did in 2016, despite all of his behaviors, all of his policies, all of his words. Wow. Do I even know how I feel about the issues? See, people, this is a theme in some other classes, teach about nationalism. People themselves don't really know what they want. They think, what people want is they want somebody who makes them feel good about being who they are. And Donald Trump could make you feel good about being a white man, or even any kind of man, or conservative member of American society. That I don't have to feel embarrassed about believing that marriage should just be between a man and a woman, and that transgender kids should not be allowed to play sports because it's not fair. I don't have to feel bad about that. Donald Trump allows me to feel good or be respected, feel like I'm respected for my traditional values that liberals and progressive college professors mock as being prejudiced and bigoted and oppressive. So this is a complicated task, and this is the focus of micropolitics. How do voters decide whom to vote, if they're going to vote at all, when they themselves, when you ask them survey results? I mean, that's an important point to highlight, and that's not really highlighted in the book, this book that we're reading. Public opinion surveys did very badly in predicting Donald Trump's victory in 2016, and they did almost as bad in 2020. Like, I remember my home state of Ohio. It's supposed to be a swing state. It's supposed to vote for who wins the presidential election. And it voted for Donald Trump in 2016 by 8 percentage points. And there was, again, all sorts of expectations that this time it would be much closer in Ohio. And again, Donald Trump won in 2020 by 8 percentage points, when public opinion surveys were not predicting that. People themselves, they're not even honest to themselves, not to mention you and me. We lie to each other. That's true, but we also lie to ourselves. We do it all the time. So there was lots of discussion leading up to the 2020 election of how are you going to really get a true indication of how people are going to vote. And I think I told you the story how some political scientists and public opinion pollsters came up with a method where I won't ask you, if you're an American voter, how you're going to vote, because you might not be honest to me. You might not be honest to yourself. You might say, well, I haven't decided, but you really got to vote for Donald Trump. Or you might say, well, I'm leaning towards Joe Biden, but then 2020 comes around, November 3rd, 2020, and you vote for Trump, and you surprise yourself as well by doing that. So how if I'm a nice, smart-looking public opinion survey interviewer, I come up to you, knock on your door, say, hi, I'm here to do public opinion survey. Who are you going to vote for in 2020? And you want to impress me. I look like I'm a college student. You say, well, I'm thinking about maybe Hillary Clinton in 2016. So you have to get around these ego image issues. So what one pollster was doing was asking people, how are your neighbors in your neighborhood going to vote? How do you think your neighbors are going to vote? Because they'll be more honest about their neighbors while projecting themselves onto their neighbors. They don't know how their neighbor's going to vote, but they can more honestly talk if they're talking about somebody else other than themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? So again, it's difficult, and this process is complicated, obviously. And so the things you should do that we teach in school: take a position. What do I think about the issues? What do I care about? Research the candidates' positions on the issues. Learn about the candidates' leadership skills and qualifications. So their history, their supposed successes and not so great successes. Listen, find out what other people think and why, and grade the candidates and decide for yourself. So that's supposedly what you're supposed to do. You're not just supposed to rely upon whether or not somebody's a Republican or a Democrat. Like, I'm a Republican, I vote for Republicans. Or I'm a Democrat, I vote for Democrats. That's being criticized here. Remember, public education is a big topic of controversy today in 2022. How to be good voters and citizens. Step one, what do I think? It is hard to evaluate. Do you see this? Yeah. It is hard to evaluate where a candidate stands on an issue, a topic, if you don't know where you stand. Comparing your opinions with the opinions of the candidates is a great way to get started. Check 3 issues you care about in the first column, and 3 qualities you look for in a candidate in the second column. Issues I care about, education. So let's. Yes. So head to top 3, since Kim Jong-un spoke with him. So it's top 3. So children genes ahead. Heads, tails. Heads, it's Juliet. Heads, tails. So Micah Malinsky. Class. So Micah, on this What are the three issues you care about, Micah?
The environment, I think, would be number one. Then education and healthcare would be the
And Micah, what are the three qualities that you look for in a candidate?
intelligent, honest, and trustworthy. Yeah.
That was the claim made by many supporters of Donald Trump, that Donald Trump, he tells it like it is. He's bluntly honest about the way the world really works, right? And you know, Africa, they're shithole countries. You're going to deny it compared to the rest of the world? Oh, he tells it like it is. He's honest. He's not like a typical politician who weasels and dances around with careful language. He's an honest guy, just like your honest guy that you know and your people you know in your life. Is he trustworthy? Is he honest? This is hard. The essence of what a political charisma is difficult to define. What my professor described, one word in terms of how people evaluate candidates, in terms of who they support, do they trust the candidate? So why would people trust Donald Trump? He's supposedly a rich business person, and Americans idealize in their mythology of what it means to be the perfect American is not the professional politician, because that's the professional aristocrats. We're professional politicians. Aristocrats are people born and raised to be leaders, to be politicians. He's not a college professor. He's not a trade union leader. He's a successful businessman. He's got the grace of God because he has shown, even though, of course, he inherited his money from his father, but that's okay because we all kind of respect family. But he portrayed himself as a successful businessman on The Apprentice. He's white with blonde hair, so blonde it's orange. He accepted Jesus into his heart. For all of these reasons, people might not agree with everything that Donald Trump decides, but they trust him. In other words, I see in Donald Trump somebody like me, or somebody that I aspire to be, that I think is ideal. And what's ideal in Poland, or what's ideal in Switzerland, or what's ideal in Korea is different. But in the United States, he played that perfectly. And that began, of course, was encouraged with his television show, The Apprentice, right? He's supposedly the expert multi-billionaire businessman. You're fired. Oh wow, this guy, he's so typically perfectly American in terms of the American ideal. He's not talking about transgender. So why do you like Donald Trump? And they'll give you a reason. People always give you a reason if you ask them something. It doesn't necessarily mean that reason is accurate. So you're supposed to research the candidates in terms of get the information you can on websites, meetings, town hall meetings. You look through the media, including their speeches and the like, and the public record. And of course, social media includes lots of commentary, infinite amount of commentary that is provided through Facebook and Twitter and the public record, things that they have done, things that they have said, nonpartisan voter websites, candidates' voting records, and civic organizations. So there's no reference here to looking at what's on Facebook. Like, you're supposed to do your own research through nonpartisan voter websites, civic organizations. Learn the candidate's skills and qualifications. What kind of jobs have they had? Do they have a good reputation in your area? What kind of education do they have? Did I share this with you? This file? I shared this second file? No? Okay, let me share the second. So you can download that file. And then download the next file as well. Yeah. Yeah, you can you if you want to, sure. So find out what other people think. Hearing the opinions of others can help you clarify your own views on the candidates. Asking people you know what they think and why they think it is helpful. But here are some other ways to learn about other people's opinions that you not thought of. Opinion polls, endorsements are a way. Follow the money. There's no reference to social media on this. Endorsements are a way for interest groups and organizations to give an official thumbs up to a candidate. Donald Trump is all about his endorsements to try to maintain his dominance in the Republican Party. That's one of the reasons why the outcome of these elections are so important going on right now, because it's an illustration of Donald Trump's influence. And if his endorsements win, he becomes even more powerful because of his endorsements appear to be effective. So he lost in Nebraska, but he won in Ohio. It's not clear if he won, whom the people he endorsed in Pennsylvania are going to win for Senate. Follow the money. How do the candidates pay for all these advertisements? So this 2020 election was the first election in which the Joe Biden campaign spent over $1 billion. It's the first $1 billion presidential campaign. And the total, of course, it's the most expensive campaign election cycle in history. I think it was over $16 billion was spent, which I think might be double the 2016 total expenditure in the 2016 election cycle. And then you're supposed to grade the candidates. Of course, regarding that money, you're going to read about that in one of the later chapters about the money and where the money came from, who donated the money, super PACs, individuals, rich donors. Michael Bloomberg, the rich billionaire in the United States, he ran briefly for president in 2020. He spent $1 billion of his own money for a failed campaign bid. He, I think, got like 55 convention delegates when he needed like 2,000 to get the nomination. Tom Steyer, another billionaire, spent like $140 million of his own money or something. Of course, he didn't succeed. Again, this was all at the time when people were concerned that the Democrats are going to lose again. Donald Trump, Joe Biden is too old. He's already lost repeatedly. Who's going to beat Donald Trump? I will defeat Donald Trump. I, Michael Bloomberg, will save America from this American Mussolini. And I'm a successful businessman too. But he's also Jewish American. So many Americans have stereotypes about Jewish people. And so also to the next one, I think I already sent you that, 5 and 6. So go to view. And so there's 2 candidates. So prepare the candidates, we teach the children. There's a radio advertisement. Vote for change this election day. Candidate Stevens believes in bringing a new perspective to the office of president. His experience as the mayor of Hilltown gives candidate Stevens insight into how a government should be run. He will balance our budget improve schools, and end U.S. involvement in foreign wars. I am candidate Stevens, and I approve this message. And of course, that sounds vaguely like Pete Buttigieg, the first openly gay candidate. The highest elected office he held was mayor of South Bend, Indiana. I think that's where Notre Dame University is located. Very smart guy, Rhodes Scholar. I think his father was a professor at Notre Dame University. So another advertisement. A vote for candidate Gardner is a vote for progress. As a senator, candidate Gardner helped pass laws to lower taxes and protect our borders. She supported our troops fighting in our wars abroad. As president, she will limit government spending, support growing businesses, and limit our need for foreign oil. So limit government spending. That's always a focus on American politicians, that government spending is a threat to excessive government spending is a threat to American private enterprise. And so you're supposed to evaluate them. So again, you're supposed to do, it's just trying to encourage students to do more than just rely upon labels, rely upon gossip. You're supposed to do some work to find out about the candidates you're voting for, some research. And which, again, for most people, they don't really do. They rely upon what knowledge they have, the gossip they have with each other, as well as through social media. Not everybody, but that's common for, I think, your most common American voter. So so open that up. And fix this up. Select the correct word to complete each sentence. So who's going to speak now? Let me. And its tails, so it will be no, Kim Jong-un or Ice with fences. Kim Jong-un and its tails. Ice. Please fill in these statements. 1. During a debate, candidates discuss their views on various issues. Number 2, one way to see how people plan on voting on it is to check out their most recent 3, fundraising opinion polls. Right, I got to repeat because doesn't have a microphone. Fundraising dinners try to raise money from blank to use in the candidate's campaign. Yay, contributors to use in the candidate's campaign. 4, the League of Women Voters is an example of a blank organization, one that does not support one political party over another. Yay, nonpartisan. 5, candidates seek blank from large organizations, celebrities, and other big name companies. Yay, endorphins. And next one, let's see. Okay, so coin and it's tails, and that means only Kim Pyeong-ku. Kim Pyeong-ku. We'll do the next set of exercises. So Kim Pyeong-ku, put the steps you have learned about in the correct order. So you have 5 slots here. So put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where would you put number 1? What would be the first step? Number one. Where would you put number one? Yay! Okay. So decide what you think about the issues. What would be number two? Yay! All right. What would you put number three? Okay. What would you put number four? Okay. And then number five. Now, this might sound kind of silly, or this is not silly. Most Americans don't do this. Most American voters, not all, but remember that pyramid I showed you? I mean, we're all excited about the fact that 67% of voters voted in 2020. So 33% didn't vote. Typically around 52, 53% of voters vote until 2016. So most Americans don't do this. They just rely, if they vote, the single, not the only, but the single still most important factor determining how people vote is that person Republican or Democrat. Even me. I mean, like I told you, we have elections all the time in the US. There's another election coming up in Ohio at the beginning of August, 2 months from now. And all of these offices for the 80,000, well, not in Ohio, but all of these local and state and national positions and offices have to be elected. How am I going to research all of these people? I can type their names into Google, and I do, see what comes up, and that's it. I don't ponder who am I going to vote for to be the coroner of the state of the Stark County, who's responsible for doing medical examinations for legal cases. Like there's a dead body, the coroner is supposed to tell you whether or not this person was shot, when they got killed. I mean, and there might be two people running. How am I going to choose? Am I going to delve deeply into the history of these two individuals? No. Oh, that one's a Republican. That one's a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. Next. Yeah, maybe for president, maybe for senator, but there's all sorts of offices that we fill. And if I can't find it on social media really quickly, I'm going to rely upon party ID, party identification. Match the information with the source. Each source will have more than one piece of information. Let's see. Who's next? And, go to Julia's heads. And it's Juliet. Juliet Scales. So Juliet is next. Yes, Juliet. Juliet.
Yes.
Where would you put evening news story on the upcoming election? Would you put it under the candidate or the media or the public record?
Evening historians not coming. The media.
Yay! B, page on the candidate's website that talks about the candidate's qualifications and skills. Where would you put that? Here?
Maybe the candidate.
Yay! Record of a candidate's voting history when he or she was in office.
The candidate too.
No, the public record!
Oh, okay.
That's supposed to be nonpartisan, right? That's
okay.
supposed to be just basic information. Primetime television debate between the top two candidates.
The media.
Okay. Typically, you know, they're being asked questions by journalists. The journalists formulate the questions. The journalists try to control the debate. Postcard from the candidate's campaign team outlining where the candidate stands on the issue. So you get that in the mail, right? That's one of the reasons you need money for these campaigns.
Okay, but it's from the candidate.
Yay! Okay, F, you get the chance to speak to a candidate at a town hall meeting and ask a few questions.
The public record.
Well, I guess you get from the candidate, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is the record of public government action.
Oh,
Visit,
okay, okay.
okay, visit a nonpartisan website that compares the two leading candidates before an election.
I don't know. I don't know. I hesitate between the candidate and the public record.
It says a nonpartisan website means it's not a website. It's a website
Okay,
that's not part of the candidate's campaign organization.
So
It's not part of a
the
political party organization. It's like a
media.
nonprofit organization, like the League of Women's Voters. So where would you put that?
Media.
No, the public record.
Okay.
The public record. And the candidates are interviewed on a very popular morning talk show.
Media.
Yes, I think the point being made here is the media, that's, for the most part, that's a for-profit business. The media is part of the, well, I almost said entertainment industry. So they are trying to get viewers and people to watch the media, market share of the media market, because then if they have more viewers, they can charge more for advertising from people that advertise on the media. So the media is not really an unbiased source of information, particularly when you have the infinite fragmentation of the media with social media. I mean, there's an infinite number of sources of information in the media that you can go to. And these infinite sources of information that have emerged over the last 40 years, over 40 years, since CNN began in 1980, they are targeting specific groups within the public viewing sector, the public within the American population. To get control or dominance over a particular group of people when there's an infinite number of sources of information that people can go to in the media. And they tend to go, not everybody, but they tend to go to sources of information that make them feel good about believing what they believe, that engage in what's called the self-confirmation bias. I like news sources that tell me what I want to hear. And I can say, oh, well, Fox News said it. It's the most popular news source in America. So it must be valid. You might disagree with me, but you can't say my ideas are crazy. When Tucker Carlson, the Fox News commentator, talks about the replacement theory that may have motivated this Buffalo shooter, that there's a push by global elites in Europe and US to bring in non-white, non-Christians to dominate the political system in support of their globalist cosmopolitan agenda. The French author who came up with that idea was Renaud, his first name is Renaud Camus, The Great Replacement, a book I think was published 40 years ago. And there was another one before that called Something of the Saints from another French author. So the public record means nonpartisan, and that means that you have to also be careful in terms of evaluating these websites, because I know and you know that if you believe I'm not partisan and I'm not political and I give you information, you're more likely to trust it because, Ben's not trying to win me over to Donald Trump or Joe Biden. He's not partisan. So often these websites and donors also will claim to be nonpartisan, or they will try to hide their identity or hide their partisan affiliation because they can have more influence over my mind and your mind. Because if you know I'm pro-Trump, then what I say has less value to you. Because you say, well, he's trying to persuade me. It's propaganda, not the truth. It's propaganda. Pretending to be the truth, which is the worst kind of propaganda. The most effective kind of propaganda. So you'll read more about that in the discussion of the sources of money for campaigns, how many contributors to these campaigns, they try to hide their identity because they have more influence that way, because you can't dismiss who they are supporting. We say, well, they're trying to promote oil and gas because the money comes from the oil and gas industry. So, okay, I have to this computer. Stand by.